Welcome, everyone. Great to see you again. I'm excited to be here with you today. I just really apologize. I had a last minute work emergency. I had a board meeting and I couldn't get out of it. There were other folks involved and they were calling from Israel. So it was a tough schedule. Really excited about today. From Doug and I got to follow up yesterday. Sounds like it went really, really well. And I love these topics today. So very excited to jump back in and be a bigger participant today.
Great. Well, my friends, today will be very different from Tuesday, which of course is what we all want, so we're not repeating ourselves. Our breakout groups look first at the board's management of itself, and then that's round 2. Round 3, we move to that most precious of all professional relationships between the board and its chief executive officer, our superintendent. Let me quickly remind you of our ground rules, and we'll adhere to them. We're on a first name basis, and everyone is an equal participant, board members and cabinet members. So this is an informal, collegial, indeed familial meeting, which is the way it should be. Almost all of our time, 95% of it today, will be breakout group deliberations and reporting out. So once again, a board-driven day, since each breakout group is chaired by a board member. The breakout process, you'll recall, is free-flowing, no right, no wrong answers. Anything mentioned gets recorded and becomes part of the history of this meeting. No attempt to reach consensus or edit or vote or anything of that kind. We're asking breakout group leaders, just a reminder to our 4 leaders today, to appoint someone to keep track of time because it will disappear quickly, and also to record points. So we'll need a recorder, a timer, a recorder. Recorders, please send via email or fax your written reports no later than end of day tomorrow, Friday, to Angelia Strode. She has to have them by Friday close of business, and we'll get to work on the record of this meeting. I listened to the recording of our deliberations on Tuesday, and I have to tell you that it might have felt a little rough to you, but those hills are filled with gold. Very, very, very good stuff. Robust discussion, very substantive deliberations. Everything we wanted Tuesday to be, Tuesday was. I'm very pleased to say, as your advisor. Now, round 2 that we're going to jump into in a minute. And so you don't get worried, remember, we built in flex time. We will adjourn on time, but if we start either of the breakout groups a few minutes late, you still get your full time and we'll still be fine. We got plenty of flex time. We're not going to worry. But round 2, groups C and D, are based on the premise it's your board, period. Whatever guidelines we have at the state level, whatever legislation we have, it's still your board. Obviously, state law does constrain us and empower us, I suppose, to some extent, and that's fine. But basically, it will be the board you want it to be, period. It will be no more effective than you want it to be. And that requires that we manage this board as an organization, not as an abstract body that does vague work, but we literally, consciously manage it. And that's what Group C is about. And we look at, you'll remember the slides, I think in the little refresher I gave on Tuesday, we look in Group C under Mary's very capable leadership. We look at the board as people. And we think about how we develop the governing skills and knowledge in a rapidly changing field called K-12 governance, changing as we're working today, dramatically, being rewritten. How do we make sure board members, new board members, are oriented, and how do we make sure they stay up to speed? And what kind of culture are we building on this board? What do we want it to feel like on this board? Well, that's kind of the people question. The Group B, under Mickey's leadership, looks at a slightly different but related dimension. How do we manage our performance? So we're going to look at what we can expect of each other, what you might call expectations or targets. And we'll look at governing expectations and non-governing expectations of board members. We'll look at how we communicate, how we interact with each other. So we'll get a handle on the people aspect of, on the performance management aspect of the governing business. And as I said on Tuesday, the way to really make this a satisfying meeting for yourself, have at it. Say anything on your mind. Do not be constrained. Relax, listen, learn from your colleagues, and help teach your colleagues through your participation. This is a self-teaching event, not a training event. Now, before we jump into our breakout groups, I see our president has joined us. Daji, would you like to share any comments with us?
Absolutely not. My apologies for my tardiness.
No apology necessary, Madam President. We're happy you're with us. And so we're going to have a great day. Are there any questions about round two? Oh, I thought of one other thing. Mary and I were talking in the main room, which is where we all are right now, about a couple of things. Another thing I don't want you to worry about. It doesn't matter whether anything we're talking about has been developed and written about and is somewhere in your files. We do not care. We are not worried about anything that has been written in the past. Any reconciliation that's necessary, anything we need to know to fit what we're doing with something done in the past, we'll do after this meeting, so that you don't have to worry whether something is whether it's in state law, whether it's in our bylaws, whether it's in a policy somewhere. Don't worry about it. We'll deal with it later. Okay, no questions? Jamie, what happens now?
I am going to open the breakout rooms.
And does everyone need to
Click join.
quick join? Have at it, my friends. Enjoy. I'll be with you, and Daji will be with you too. We'll be rotating back and forth. Have a great session.
See you in a little bit.
Here we go.
See ya. Take care. Of one person, Matthew, who's not in a room.
Dr. Alexander,
I think
he
he's
may have stepped away.
Now, Jamie, can I get rid of this box?
yes. Well, if you want to join, no, you have to join first and then it will go away.
Okay. So I'll leave it there for the time being because I'm going to join the groups.
Yes, you guys should be able to join whichever group you want.
Dodgy.
Okay, yes.
Have you had any feedback on since Tuesday?
I have not. I think they gave most of their feedback at the end of the session. So I have not heard from anyone else.
So
But I think it was effective.
good.
I think the
do too.
breakout sessions, what I thought about that this morning. And I was thinking, one of the things that I took away from our last session, we have more in common than we think we do when we concentrate on just doing the business. It was amazing to see people, agreeing with each other that never do that.
Yeah, that was my impression. And I think we heard that from a couple of people.
Mhm.
But in a sense, no news is good news. No one complained to you about
Oh, not
it.
at all. And I like the fact that I see now why you have us meeting with staff, because I think that adds value. I think they gained value from hearing directly from board members how they felt about certain things and being able to articulate, from their perspective where they thought we had some, challenges. So I think that was helpful too.
Good. And this should be a fun
Mhm.
round, I think. In fact, the 2 rounds are going to be very fun. I want to say one thing.
Uh-huh.
You might want, I love it the way
Cheryl.
people keep bouncing from one place to another. Now, Cheryl Stewart joined us. Cheryl, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you need to click on join. What room is Cheryl in?
It looks like she already did.
No, she's not checked on
It's
group
going.
C.
Oh, it's going through.
Yeah.
Okay, it's
Now,
happening.
what were you saying, Doug?
Oh, group F.
Join breakout room.
Yes, join breakout room.
You may want, even though you're a floater, we've kept you a free floater. You can go either room, but you might want to stay in F because that's so extraordinarily important.
Okay.
As
All
the
right.
board president, that would be a great place for you to be.
All
And
right.
remember, F is where Mark talks about his CEO-centric superintendent targets.
Okay, now
His.
mine, so I have C and D in front of me now.
Right.
Yeah.
F,
You can choose either one for them.
Okay, and then F will be the next round, correct?
that's right, the next
I
round.
got you. All right,
If you
let's
choose
see.
F now, you'll be ejected. It does not exist.
It won't even let me do it.
No.
I can't mess that up. That's the best way to do it with me. Give me something I
Well,
can't screw up.
Makes 2 of us, and
Mhm.
that's why Jamie's here to keep me on track.
Okay. All right.
So
I'm gonna join the first one first.
you're going to C.
I'm going to C first.
Okay, enjoy.
All right, see you
I'll
later.
ya. Then I'll go to D. And we'll rotate. Okay, Jamie, I can just join, right? Or do
Yes.
I don't have to click the boxes at the bottom?
No, you can just join.
And then I'll have an option though to leave, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so I'll join D. See you later. You'll stay in the main.
Yep.
Okay,
Because we're still missing one, Miss Smith.
you'll watch for her.
Yes.
Here we come. Are all of us back? I think we must be. So, but for the next, let's see, for the next half hour, we'll do our reports and discussion, what happened in our groups, and then we'll take a break. Let me just say, after the break, we come back to the main room. We'll have a little discussion about the last breakout session when we come back after the break. So with no further ado, let me turn it to Group C, and Mary, I think that's your group.
Okay, great. So I'm very thankful to our group because they all had great opinions. We were honored to have both a new staff person, Janika, who served as our recorder, and Doug as our timer, but also having Walt as a brand new board member on this discussion of board human resource development. So good input there. We had a great brainstorming session. So I think better to just let Janika report out on what we talked about, and then we can chime in. Janika?
Okay, so we talked about 3 different specific areas. The first one was identifying critical elements of a comprehensive orientation program for board members. So we identified, clearly identifying roles and responsibilities, and direct supervision of the board, which include the CFO, the superintendent, and the general counsel. We discussed school finances, how they are funded, which ones we receive, what it is, and how we can spend it, and how we cannot spend those finances. We also discussed the overview of the Students First Act. So the board members are becoming well versed in the Student First Act and any adverse employee actions. So having a clear overview of legal perspectives and the legal process for BCS. We also discussed community and being a problem solver for the community. And what does that look like? What is the board members' interpretation, and making sure we have integrity of the systems and how we process those problem solving. And I think the last point there was PR. How do we engage the community? The second point was identifying ongoing critical elements for the board. So Mary discussed receiving a large binder of policies at the beginning, but making sure those policies are updated and they also receive the updates and are made aware. We discussed attending national and state conferences for staff and board members, and making sure we present those outcomes if people cannot attend those meetings. But making sure the board members receive regular updates from all the major functions within the school district, and also maybe attending the Council of Great City Schools, since that is such a large convening of national urban districts. We discussed legislative reform and just making sure we bring things back when we attend different outings. The third topic was identifying key characteristics of a healthy board culture. So of course we discussed respect and courtesy. We also discussed accepting the decisions of a whole. The board works as a whole body, and making sure, although there may have been dissenting opinions, but make sure the board presents itself as an accepting whole, a team. Also, we discussed having norms of engagement. So having operational norms for the board members, making sure we are respectful of diverse perspectives and considerate of valid points, having a collaborative working relationship, and having open and shared thoughts and concerns. And respecting the process of the decision as a whole. What else did we have? So we ended on team building, just creating a consensus, maybe sometimes having informal communication that can help build, a level of camaraderie and respect for one another, which will lead into the work relationship. And that is the majority of what we discussed. Did I miss any major point, Mary?
I don't think so. Yeah, the point at the end that Doug made about members taking the time to get to know each other well. You mentioned that, but he said, you know, that has been a hallmark of some of the healthy boards that he has been a part of in the past. So that was helpful.
Anybody like to add anything?
Yeah.
I want to say a word about the orientation piece because it's so tremendously important. A couple of things I've seen happen in recent years. The first is to make the orientation predominantly about the governing work of the board and the governing responsibilities, so that not the district as a whole, how it's financed and its educational programs, that's important. But the reason people join a board is for one reason, not to run the district, but to govern the district. So one thing I'm seeing is orientation programs that are heavily board focused, and I think that's the way it should be. Welcome to the board. Here's our structure. Here are our performance expectations of each other. Here are our bylaws of the board, and so on and so forth. Here are the bios of board members, and on and on. But another thing that is happening is this orientation is presented by board members to board members. So typically, if you have a governance committee, members of that governance committee will present the part of the orientation relating to the governing role and responsibilities of the board, so that a new board member immediately realizes, whoa, I'm joining this board to engage in an extremely complex and demanding function called governing. And here's what it's all about. Here's the work of governing. And there is, by the way, and this will be true of our other group, increasingly the use of a committee called governance or board operations to oversee things like orientation and training of board members, to actually manage that process. Any other comments for this group?
You know, this makes me think about something. We have been coming together. This is around more ongoing knowledge that we need to keep up to date with. But the superintendent has been having deep dive sessions where we come together, sort of small groups or whatever, to tackle subjects that need a little more time than can be done at a board meeting. And those, I think, are good and ought to be sustained. But if we have committees that are functioning, that may end up superseding how we have to get together in these deep dive meetings. I'm not sure. Be curious to see. Well, we had a great group, so I don't know.
I forget if this point came out. I was kind of distracted. I was making a couple notes, but one of the things I think probably was in the report was that when we take a systematic approach to sending board members to conferences at the local, state, and national level, but that we ask them to bring reports back.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you mentioned that, but that was something I heard that I thought was really great. Even to the point of, if you go to NSBA, bring the slides back with you. They're typically yours, by the way, if you attend a session at a national or state conference, you get a copy of the slides, and have a workshop of board members. You, the board member who went to the meeting, come back and actually facilitate a roundtable. So part of your culture is that you're sharing with each other new developments in this field of governance. And no better way to find out what they are than go to NSBA or your state school board association meetings.
Doug, may I ask you a question?
Bring them back. Yeah.
May I ask you a question?
Of course.
I'm listening to both you and Mary. Having a committee on governance is okay, but from my experience on the board, I have noticed that we get board members or people to run for the board, and the majority of the times they've never attended one of our board meetings. And when we get new board members, they come on the board and you already have an agenda, or either you know what you want to change or what you don't like about what's going on in the district. And it's okay to get a committee on governance, but it's kind of hard to change some people's mindset on what they think they can do on the board. And once you really look into the training of board members, you find out that you don't have the authority, ability, or power to change certain things. It's okay when you get new board members, which this board will probably be getting new board members come August. But some of the people that run, they already have a mindset. I don't like this, and I'm going to do this. And if you have never attended any of the board meetings to actually see the structure and what's going on, that creates problems when you get new board members.
So maybe we should suggest to the candidates that they start attending our board meetings.
Well, that's what really you don't, if you're new and you've never attended a board meeting, you don't actually know what's going on, what the board is dealing with. Even you don't really know what's going on with the superintendent in the relationship with the board.
Well, we'll tell you this, I'm working with boards where the board president or chair and the superintendent actually invite candidates for seats on the board to a special briefing session. By the way, there's nothing, the law would never prevent that in a million years. It would welcome it. And they actually, and this is being done by transit boards I'm working with, economic development boards I'm working with. It's becoming a staple. We hold a round table. If you're running for the board, we want you to ask any question you ever want to ask about the board. We'll tell you how we're structured. We'll actually give you a pretty thorough orientation. And so that's one way. One other point, committees, if they're well designed, I promise you, have proved to be a powerful way of bringing new board members into the board. They immediately engage board members, so they feel like they're engaged. They feel like they're doing important work. They're not just sitting there in a full board meeting feeling new. You know the old American rule, don't speak up until you've sat there for a year listening to others. Committees do away with that. You have to participate. There are only 3 or 4 of you on a committee with the executive team. So that's another way to fight that syndrome. People come on with special agendas and preconceived notions. Well, get them engaged very fast. Mm-hmm. But also this pre-briefing, I've seen it done beautifully. And it's a compliment to people who are running for board seats. That we think you're very important. You might be elected. You might be a colleague. We're going to brief you about everything. It all comes back. Remember, it's your board. Make it everything it can be. And your governing experience will be much more satisfying, much richer if you play the leading role. Training is a weak tool for doing this. That's why this is not a training session. We're working together in developing this board, taking it to the next level. Training can never do that. So, any more comments for Group C? Great job. If we were in person, we would shout and clap and so on. We'll have a little more decorum here, but thank you very much. Great stuff. And now let's turn to Mickey. And
thanks, Doug. We had an incredible group. I want to thank Jermaine, the great Dr. Jermaine Dawson, for keeping us on track. And the wonderful Miss Crystal Briggs, who was our recorder, who I'll turn to in a minute. It's really interesting watching these two conversations. Doug and I have talked about this. There's a lot of overlap in these. And what really, I think one of the key themes that she'll hit on that came out of here was, how do we work better as a team? How do we do better at orienting the group and developing a culture between the board, the superintendent, and the cabinet? Because we all are working towards the same goal. How do we make it friendlier, less adversarial? I think a lot of that came out. So I will turn it over to Crystal, and then we can have a conversation about it. So take it away, Crystal.
Thank you, Mickey. As was stated, we had some very great dialogue in our group, and it is refreshing to hear some of that overlap that existed with the first group in our reporting out. So one of the first target areas that we had to discuss was governing and non-governing performance targets, sort of like KPIs. One thing that we brought to light was board meeting participation, because we feel like if board members are engaged, if they are participating, then of course they will be able to understand that the business that is transpiring. So whatever that benchmark be set at, if it's 90% or 95%, we just like to ensure that board participation is held. Also around fiscal resources, we want to make sure that we're good stewards of public dollars. And so one of those KPIs that came around fiscal responsibility was setting a benchmark or a target around fund balance. We know the State Department requires that 1 month target. And if we as a district would like to set that benchmark at 2 or 3 months, let's have those discussions so we meet that bar consistently. Also, we want to ensure that the board works together collaboratively, handling conflict out of the public viewing when at all possible. Now, there was some back and forth about this, that sometimes even when we do have those conversations, they do tend to spill over into the public forum, but just creating a culture where we can agree to disagree and have professional courtesies for each other. Also, we feel like board members should be trained and understand governance and board policy. So this kind of ties into those next points about onboarding. And I think that was mentioned in the first group. We really feel like that would be one of the key components for new board members, and not only onboarding new board members, but that continual process of you having that continual education around new policy updates, and having those refresher courses so that we, again, are apprised of our roles and responsibilities as board members. Also, we mentioned that we'd like to see more stability around our top leadership roles. So that could be in the superintendency role and our CFO role, because we understand around advanced education and accreditation, we sometimes are presented as high risk when you have high turnover in those capacities. It also creates a culture of inconsistency, and we just like to see more continuity in those areas. It was also brought up that we'd like to see in terms of board member evaluations, that there be input from internal and external stakeholders in respect to that. So that pretty much sums up the first target that we discussed. Our next area delved into rules of how the board communicates and interacts. And what we really wanted to just leave with is that everyone is respectful of others' opinions. We know sometimes your background and where you may come from may input your decision making on the board, but just to make sure that we are reviewing the facts and data as that they are presented, and that we remain neutral, in that respect when we seek approvals. Another thing that was kind of discussed from some of the cabinet officers is just around culture. We want to create a culture where officers don't feel trepidation or anxiety when presenting to the board. We want to know that we have that support and that we're working collaboratively with each other. So, again, it goes back to being respectful, having civil discourse, and assume that everyone is coming from a good place. In that, we also had just some counter discussion about the board wants to ensure though that the information that they are receiving is timely and is accurate and factual. And that will help build a trust between the board and again, those chief executive officers. The cabinet and board members can build a better rapport, and how we felt that this may be obtainable is through just those committees, building some type of cultural structure within the district. And if that's something outside of culture building exercises, really have a definitive answer of what that looks like, but we do understand that that needs to happen to build that better rapport with board members and our senior executive leadership. The next item that we have is to identify issues relating to the board and communication and interaction. And one thing that was brought up is that the district has adopted the dual meeting process where we have work session and board meetings. Of course, in work session is where we have dialogue and we kind of address all of those concerns that we have for agenda items. However, we feel that this sometimes spills over into the actual business of the board meeting. And we just like to see more discussion had at work session so that business can be conducted in a formal setting for the board meeting. And it was also mentioned that we have gotten better at this in this COVID environment. So we just like to continue to see us move in that trajectory in a positive manner. And the last thing that was discussed in this area is that some of the cabinet officers, we brought up the fact that even upon board members receiving board packets, we hope that we can receive questions and feedback and update prior to those work sessions so that we're better able to address questions or concerns that come out during the work session. And just as a again, a professional courtesy so that we can already have those, things in our mind. And if you ask them in work session, we're more engaged. And so that pretty much sums up our area, and I'll turn it back over.
Whoa, great stuff. So anyone have at it? Questions, comments, anything you want to ask or add before I share my observations?
Great job, Crystal. Thank you.
Dr. Horn, I hate to put you on the spot and you probably don't even remember exactly what you said, but when you were talking about looking at it from a broader perspective, there was something I thought that you said that it was critical in terms of how the board interacts, views ourselves, and engages.
Yeah, can you remind me a little bit more of that?
There we go. You were saying that you were saying basically from a holistic perspective, if we look at our board and our structure as a school system, if as board members individually, if we asked ourselves, what do we think our job is? Is it to be an advocate for the community? Is it to be a problem solver? That part.
Okay. And really, it was sort of rhetorical, just sort of to get us to think about it. But I know you all are getting interaction with the community, with the people within the school district from a lot of different places. And they come at you with sometimes some claps on the back, or other times they're wanting you to solve a problem for them or take care of an issue or whatever. And I think in terms of how you all accept that and then act on it is something that may need to be clarified, because going back to the problem solving, if somebody brings you a problem, say, I just need you to take care of this for me. I just want you to solve this problem for me. If that means you going directly to either a principal or a staff member here in the district or to Dr. Sullivan, whatever the action is after that may determine how well we function. And I think some of that may need to be cleared up, so that you're right, we don't fall over each other, and in the end, we cause more problems than otherwise would have been a problem because of how we handled it. And I think the team said we needed to kind of clarify really what should be our approach.
Doug?
Yes, and I think Spencer brings up excellent points there. One thing I found, of course, I found this out in campaigning as well as just in general. There's a misconception out there about our roles and responsibilities and our authority and so forth. And I think protocol is what we're talking about here. And I think that when I go to neighborhood meetings and so forth, I make sure I try to clarify to the community exactly what my role is and what my responsibilities are, as opposed to giving the impression I can solve this problem to you. Because if you have a problem in a school, obviously the first area or person you should go to is that school principal in the community. You need to take those protocols. But when it comes to me from a citizen or whatever, I'm going directly to Dr. Sullivan, the superintendent, Mark, and let him know the concern there. And he can in turn handle it from the standpoint of delegating it to a particular staff member, or if he wants to delegate it to that staff member to get back with me and so forth, that's fine. But I'm not going to overstep my bounds in terms of trying to solve a problem by going to people that don't report directly to me, i.e. the superintendent, the chief financial officer, and the board attorney. I think it's important that people in the community understand that we're not necessarily there to solve the problem on when you come to us from the standpoint of saying, okay, I take care of this. Board members are unilateral in the sense that we're one vote and we have to work together, and we certainly have to work with our superintendent to make sure he understands the concerns of the community and make sure that we just have a partnership collaboratively where we can kind of get back with that communication to the community, as well as working with the superintendent, his staff, and not necessarily seeing it as I have this authority or I have this power to resolve this issue, because we really don't.
You know, there is, in my experience, and I think that's a very good point, a wide lack of understanding of what school boards do, what they are accountable for, the rules that constrain them. The whole field of K-12 governance is, in my experience, poorly understood in most communities. And the group that looked at, Group D, looked at non-governing performance, your group, Mickey. Well, many boards, and I think we talked about this on Tuesday, many boards around the country are booking board members to speak in the community systematically, regularly, identifying forums where it makes sense to have board members speak. But another development that's part of that is many board members are actually educating the public about the board. Let me tell you about our board. Let me tell you about the people on the board. Let me tell you about our performance standards and targets as a board. Let me tell you the authority we have as a board, and so on and so on and so on, as a way of widening public understanding. It is an area traditionally that has not been well handled. And so there is a fairly high level of distrust of educational institutions around the country.
Doug, I know we're kind of banging up on time. That's one I wish we had covered a little bit more of when board members are able to speak freely, speak to the public, speak to groups when we're representing the board or ourselves. That's been an issue for us. We didn't get to cover that in ours. We just ran out of time. But I do think that's one to put a pin in.
We have plenty of time after today, because this, as we'll talk later, there's a whole follow-through process where all of these good ideas can be more carefully examined and translated into action. Just one other point, you deserve your break. You get your break all 15 minutes. We come back at 10:30 on the dot, and then we'll do our last round of breakouts. Let me make just one observation. In the interviews I did when I was younger When were they, Angelia? February of 2020? Could it have been that long ago?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh my gosh, I was much younger. One of the issues that came up, and I was looking at my notes early this morning that came up in those interviews, was culture. Did appear to be a serious issue. And culture is what it's like to be part of an organization. How does it feel? How do we treat each other? What are the rules for communicating and interacting? That did seem to be an issue, and it's come up today. In both groups, it's come up. But I do want to make an observation. Preaching wouldn't get us anywhere. Training won't get us anywhere in terms of improving the culture. I know it won't. Preaching's never gotten any board anywhere. We can talk about how we should treat each other, blah, 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 blah. The fact is, what will make a difference is the creation of structure and processes, formal structure and processes and guidelines that are observed, because we have a committee responsible, whether you call it governance or board operations. We have a committee that actually pays attention to the culture on the board. So just remember, we can all, it's like those old sensitivity sessions, and God knows I need them. And I put myself through a lot of sensitivity programs over the years with my wife's encouragement. But the fact is, Monday always comes and the glow wears off, and the glow will wear off of this. So what we really have to do is create structure as part of our follow through and create formal process, formal guidelines, and make sure we're monitoring them. And then we will see cultural change. We are now adjourned until 10:30. See you. Yes.
And I don't want this to leave my head here, because Dodger, I'm glad you brought this up. Just want to put one little point on what you were sharing, what I was sharing with you all. You all are all elected officials, and many times how the public view you all as elected officials and that expectation that might come with that also may contribute to how the relations and the culture and all the other pieces connect to each other. And Doug, I don't know if you want to get into that at all, about how do you maintain, or how do you keep an apolitical type of influence involved in a political or an elected type of process?
Well, we might later.
Well, I don't want to answer right now, but I was just wanting to make sure, Dodgy, I put that out there, that it was more than just that question, but there are other influences that the community I know have, and how they view you all as elected officials, and their expectation of you as elected officials, and how that influences our culture and how we function within.
Very good point. And we will have to come back to it, but we promised a break. You get a break. We'll be back at 10:30. See you then. Enjoy.
Real quick, to any of those of you listening, if we were having a crisis in the district, would it be a bad idea if we all got on a plane and flew to Cancun? Because Ted Cruz just did that.
He did.
I can tell you my friends in Texas are none too happy about it.
He has a history of making a lot of people none too happy.
I actually took a phone call from a founder in Austin yesterday, and he called me from his car because that was the only place he could get electricity into his phone and heat. So,
Damn.
Wonderful.
You know, I hope it's not a sign of what the rest of us are going to be facing. I don't think it is exactly, but I do think that, and I was interested in Abbott this morning saying, on Fox News, he said it was the fault of the alternative energy sources not really performing as they should. But on another channel, he said
It's completely wrong.
Yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
Hey, did you go to the ball game? I've been meaning to ask you. Did you go to the in Tampa?
I did.
Ah, thought you might have. Fun. Yeah.
Snuck in at the last minute. It was fun.
There you go.
Of course, only we who live in Tampa, as I do, Tampa Bay, were ecstatic about the results, since I think the rest of the country wanted a cliffhanger kind of game where it was exciting to the last moment. But those of us who live
Just
here,
win, baby.
you know,
Just win.
we were happy.
So is Hillsborough School District in near Tampa, in Tampa?
Yeah, it is around. It's
It's
the
in Tampa.
county that Tampa is in.
Is Hillsborough.
I'm on the west side of the bay in Pinellas County, which is the county that includes St. Petersburg and Clearwater, where I live. So it roughly divides the population almost 50-50.
Yeah.
And both counties are in the top 10 school districts in terms of students, because
Yeah, Hillsborough is huge. Did I ever tell you that
Hillsborough's 130,000 students.
Marielle and Elia, I went to high school with her kids. I've known them
You're
a long
kidding.
time. Yeah, she's great.
Well, I was on a Zoom call and we're having lunch. Mary Ellen was superintendent of the Tampa schools, fired with no cause.
Still one of the strangest firings I've ever seen.
The same year she was named superintendent of the year in Florida.
Yeah.
Good example of why we're going to deal with the next.
That's really, she helped really transform that district from one where nobody sent their kids to one that everybody I know does now. So she had a big role in that.
She almost single-handedly got a $100 million grant.
Now that was controversial, but yeah.
Gates Foundation. It was controversial, but
So one thing we heard yesterday from Eric Mackey, Mark and I were listening to a presentation he gave, and he said that Hillsborough County comes and recruits heavily from the schools of education in Alabama. And often, you know, the lure of going to live in Tampa and work in Tampa and some of the other cities around here, anyway, that one entire graduating class of one of our universities, not one of them came to work in Alabama. And Hillsborough was a big recruiter.
Disappointing.
Yeah.
At the school that I teach at in Pasco County, we have 6 teachers from Birmingham, Alabama.
Wow.
Oh, that's right. Jamie is a teacher as
Yeah.
well as my assistant.
And they're all math and science teachers, they said, too. You know?
I'm happy to tell them why Birmingham is way better than Tampa.
I'm not in Tampa. I'm in Newport Richey.
Let me say, as a resident of Tampa Bay, I love Birmingham.
Ms. Oglesby, get her information so we can get those teachers back.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, are we critical mass yet? Is everyone with us so we can get going?
Looks like we're missing Miss Brown, Dr. Dawson, there he is, and Stewart, maybe.
I think we're close enough that we might get started.
Dawson and Stewart are present.
Miss Brown is present.
Okay, we're all here. The gang's all
Well, it's a story I tell in many presentations about the Hillsborough schools. A very shocking story. I knew Mary Ellen Elia very well. I met with her many times at the district headquarters over lunch and whatnot. She was a finalist for Superintendent of the Year nationally. That's the American Association of School Administrators Award. She was named Superintendent of the Year in Hillsborough. And I think Mary Ellen would say she took her eye off the board. She got very, very busy and became a national figure while she was here in Tampa Bay. Witnessed the fact that when she was fired, she bounced up to the largest educational system in the United States. She became Commissioner of Education of the state of New York. And so that included post-secondary as well as the K-12 system. So a huge system. And our subject today in round 3 is the board superintendent partnership. And there's a good reason for that, because the evidence is in, my friend. One of the key determinants of an effective educational system is a close, positive, productive, and enduring board superintendent partnership. If that partnership is troubled and frayed and comes asunder, the students suffer. Education suffers. It matters tremendously what happens at the top. One of my new books is Governing at the Top, about school board superintendent partnerships. But this is a very, very difficult partnership to manage. Let me tell you, the tenure of superintendents is steadily dropping in the United States. Because of that, AASA created the Aspiring Superintendents Academy. I was privileged to be a faculty member for 2 years of the academy. And what I learned traveling around the country, what I learned by being a faculty member in the academy, is that this is a very tough relationship to manage. It's prone to erode at the drop of a hat. Truly. And there are 2 reasons, I think, for that. There are probably others, but I think there are 2 primary reasons. One is lack of management of the relationship by the board. And that's one of our subjects today. How to, in round 3, is how do you manage this very complex relationship that's very fragile and is prone to erode very quickly. I suppose that means fragile. You'll pay a high price if it does. If you part company with Mark, let me be very candid, you know this anyway, you'll pay a high price down the pike. Not only the cost of finding a successor, but the reputation of the district will suffer tremendously, and it will be chaotic. I'm not saying there's a problem with Mark. I know there's not. But believe me, friends, you better pay close attention to the relationship. The second reason, and this is what the Aspiring Superintendents Academy found nationally, and I've affirmed this, confirmed it in my speaking engagements. Superintendents very often are not well prepared on their end to manage the relationship because they're trained to keep their distance from the board. They're trained to protect themselves from the board. You can't rise through the ranks in K-12 education nationally on the administrative side without learning to be wary of boards and to protect yourself from them. So there's been a sort of damage control ethic. All of that's changing now, I'm happy to say. And we're part of that change. By the way, I have asked in every speaking engagement the past 15 years, at least, for NSBA, NAASA, and state associations, how many superintendent speaking engagements, how many of you in the audience had a really great course on building and maintaining the relationship between the board and superintendent? You know how many hands have gone up over 15 years? Let's see, 15 years times an average of, well, sometimes 1,000 people, but even if the average were only 500 people in a group, it would still be a fairly large group. I would say 2% ever had a really good course. Whoa. So we kind of have to do it ourselves. And that's the point of round 3. And we are going to do some brainstorming about this relationship. And then, believe me, in my contract that I signed with this Board of Education, the follow-through process will have a lot to do with making sure that this relationship stays healthy. So we've got 2 groups, as is our tradition. We've got group E, which is going to look at the relationship generally. And I am happy to say that I think that's Sandra's group, right? Sandra, that's your group?
That's right.
Couldn't have a better person to lead this group. And group A, now remember, we're going to look at 2 pieces of this, 2 perspectives. There'll be a lot of overlapping. Guess what? That's great. Number 1, how do we know we've even got a good board superintendent relationship? How do we know it's really solid? What are the characteristics? That's job 1. Excuse me 1 second. Got to close the door to my office, which I forgot to do. I was running so fast. I'm getting some background noise here. So anything you can think of that would be a sign this is really a solid relationship. It's a good one. How would you know it? Number 2, what kinds of issues could cause this relationship to capsize, cause it to erode, cause it to disintegrate? God forbid that should happen, but I've lived long enough to know it could. Actually, it didn't take too long to learn that. So what kinds of things? And listen, friends, you got to open up. This includes executive team members, cabinet members. Don't be mute because we're talking about the board superintendent relationship. Don't stand back. All of you have a tremendous amount of experience and a lot to offer. So what could challenge this relationship? What could happen that would stress it? So we're going to brainstorm stressors. For example, just certain kinds of issues can stress the relationship. And issues galore reached the top. Think of how COVID is stressing us. A health crisis, an economic crisis. Oh my God. Kids are not in the classroom 100%. I mean, it couldn't be more stressful. That's going to stress this relationship, by the way. You better believe it. And the third thing we're going to do is map out guidelines for communication between the board and the superintendent. And also between the board and cabinet members. There's a strong trend nationally away from the idea that the superintendent should be a bottleneck and no one communicates with anyone other than the superintendent on the board. That's not tenable. That's not possible in a modern, large organization. So many boards around the country are developing guidelines to govern that so we don't get into trouble. So we're going to think about guidelines that should govern interaction between the board and the superintendent and communication between the board and the superintendent. What do we expect from Mark in terms of communicating with the board? What do we expect from the board in terms of communicating with Mark? The classic I hear all the time, I'll give you an example, is board members who say, I can't stand getting trapped in the supermarket line and I hear something I should have known. Everyone appears to know it but me. And so many boards have a guideline they've developed. The superintendent is responsible for making sure board members are never caught off guard. That the board is kept apprised of every important issue that the public might hear about. So no board member can be caught off guard. That would be an example of what we're talking about. So once again, you got to kind of relax. And this is one area you'll worry about right answers and wrong answers. There are none, period. Everything deserves talking about. So that's group E. Group F, Sonia, where are you? Everything keeps changing. Oh, there you are in the middle on my screen. Sonia is leading Group F. Now, Group F is going to feel really new to you, I got to say. So I'm going to take a little while longer. I want to tell you, you lose none of your time. The closing session is ample to cover everything, even if I run over a little bit now, because I want this to go very well. I promise you that it's not a problem. So, looking at Group F, we're going, number one, this is going to be very, very new. We are going to look at Chief Executive leadership targets. The superintendent's chief executive leadership targets that deserve very, very significant attention from Mark personally. We call them CEO-centric targets, not district targets. This is not district goals. Everyone needs to understand that. Otherwise, this is a session we don't need. This is not district goals we're talking about. It's the superintendent's personal leadership targets as your chief executive officer. And you got to understand, Mark is responsible for everything. Of course, right? He hires the top people. He's accountable. We hold him to account. Whatever the goals are, whatever the targets, and we use the annual budget as a major place to set targets. We should anyway. But remember, Mark has discretionary time as your chief executive officer. Whether he devotes 60 hours or 70 hours, which would be sort of average at the top of a major school district, he chooses priorities, and that's what this is about, to think where he might put very special attention on certain things. And I want this to be a very detailed discussion. And for this discussion, we do not need a strategic plan. We do not need a set of annual goals from the budget. We need to hear Mark talk about his targets. I want to give you a classic example. A few years ago, I worked with a CEO, superintendent, who was in a negotiation session with the board as part of the evaluation process. And he identified, and the board agreed, that one of the biggest issues we had was the relationship with the business community. They were not supporting consistently educational funding. This was a community with tax issues that had to go on the ballot. And the educational community was not weighing in. So he said, look, friends on the board, this was a committee of the board actually, I'm going to target the relationship with the Chamber of Commerce over the next year. I'm going to get on the Chamber of Commerce board by hook or by crook. I'm going to make sure of it. I'm going to make sure that the issue of business school district collaboration becomes a top tier issue. I'm going to get the chamber to establish a task force on school business relations once I'm on the board. I promise you. But I need your backing because it's going to take time for me to make that a top issue. Are you all with me there? That's what we're talking about. Not general goals, not district goals, Mark's personal leadership goals. And they will fall in these areas: educational leadership, innovation, student achievement, that's one area, traditional educational excellence kind of area, board development and support. Must be a lot of ideas flowing from what we're doing that lend themselves to chief executive targets. We're going to talk about management improvement in the district. Now, Mark doesn't have to make firm promises to us. He just has to raise questions that I think this might be a top priority of mine this coming year. I want to get your input on it. We're not negotiating. So we're going to talk about internal management improvement, things we might do to make the system more effective as an organization. And then we're going to talk about external stakeholder relations. We have to. It is widely accepted now that chief executives in all sectors, for-profit, nonprofit, and public, should commit at the very least a third of their time to external stakeholder relations, and in many cases 50% in many sectors, because it takes those relationships to keep our organization funded and happy. So we know that's a major area. So we're going to have a dialogue with Mark, and Mark's going to lead the dialogue by proposing his targets. Then we're going to look at some barriers he might face that he'll need help on in dealing with these targets, whatever you can think of, and then we'll identify where the board can be most helpful. Now, the reason we're doing this is this. These superintendent CEO-centric targets are being widely used around the country now as the basis for serious evaluation of superintendent performance, as opposed to a questionnaire of some kind that people fill out. I'm, by the way, one of the most prominent critics of what's called the questionnaire approach of evaluation. It's patently ineffective. And so this kind of process is tending to replace it. So we got two great groups. You're going to love them. You got 45 minutes. Have at it. Come back full of ideas, full of questions, full of issues, full of challenges. Don't sit there. Enjoy. So with gusto, let's move to our groups. Jamie, what happens?
I'm opening the rooms. Everybody join.
Join the right group. See you in 45.
All right, everybody's in there.
Jamie,
Yes.
I've got a text message from Mickey. Okay, this is to. No. How do I respond to it?
At the bottom of your screen where it says chat.
Well, he's obviously not using that function.
Okay, how did he send it?
Well, it's up here in the corner. Darn it.
Is he needing something from the meeting?
No, he said, are we half an hour behind? We're not half an hour behind. We're about 15 minutes behind. 10 minutes behind.
Well, we should have gone at 10:30, right? And it's 10:50, so about 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Would you
We're
like
fine.
me? I can reply to him if you want me to.
No, tell him we'll make up the time. We're fine.
Okay.
Tell him I told you that. I don't know why I can't.
Okay. All right, now you can join any room you want to.
Okay. So, Jamie.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got 45 minutes. What time will it be when we're out of the?
We have 42 minutes left, so 12:45-ish, right?
So we would be about 15 minutes late then, maybe a little more.
Yes.
Okay, why don't we bring this group back? We need to leave a little more time.
Well, if the only way that I can bring them back is like abruptly
Okay.
stopping.
You've got, it's pre-programmed.
Right.
Okay. So did you respond to Mickey?
Yes.
Yeah, just tell him we'll be about 15 minutes over.
Okay.
I think that's about it.
Okay.
But they get 45 minutes, so we'll run over just a little bit.
Okay. All right,
They'll be fine with it. They programmed it for 12:30. So.
All right, I'm gonna go check on the rooms to make sure everybody got there.
Okay, you do that, and then I'll go start going around myself.
Okay. Everyone's present and accounted for.
Is it going well?
Yes.
I changed, I can't see the screen, but is this all right? Do I have the camera set right?
Yes.
I'm sitting down.
Oh, okay.
I need to sit down just a minute. And I'm heading for the Clearwater Bridge to do my 4 crossings. What do they call that bridge? What's the Memorial? Not Memorial Bridge.
I don't know.
You know, the high bridge that goes over
I don't know
the.
what that's called. That's sad. I'm from there. I should know.
Anyway.
All right. So they have 38 minutes left. So we'll be out of there at 12:38, 12:40 basically.
That'll give us 20 minutes. 12:40, you mean our time?
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Then we're fine because it's taken us an average of 10 to 15 minutes per group. So we'll run over about 10 minutes maybe. I'm sure they'll be fine with that.
Okay.
So did you notice how it was going in the different groups?
Dr. Sullivan was talking when I was checking in that room.
Okay.
And then
Let me join him.
okay.
See ya.
See ya.
Hi, Jamie.
Hello.
Jamie?
I'm
Hi.
here.
A thought occurred to me. The NSBA template I sent you, they have a standard slide. I didn't see it, that they want to be the title of the overall thing. Did you see it?
I believe so.
Okay, that has to be in their slide.
Okay, and that should be first?
Well, can it be inserted in their template and the rest of it be my template?
I would think so. Yeah, I'll have to look
Okay.
at it.
Why don't you see if you can do that?
Okay.
And then, because she might be on the lookout for that.
Okay.
She wants it to be the first slide for everyone. I can't remember what it said, but I think it was like NSBA Annual Conference 2021,
Okay.
blah, 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 that sort of thing.
Okay. Okay. I will look for it.
Okay, so I think I am going, and we'll see. Now, if it can't be integrated, then we'll have to create the same text on our template. But we can do that. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure you can mix slide templates in the same presentation.
Okay.
So if needs be, we'll just transport it to ours. I know she'll be fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will look at it.
Okay, let's make note of that. I'm going to go back to standing up now. And so let me put my podium up again.
It's a pretty fancy podium there.
It is, yes. Everything's catch as catch can because we're redoing everything.
Right.
We moved my office to the other room, and I come in here to what was my office, which is now a den with a sofa bed.
Gotcha.
So it can be a guest bedroom. And so everything I've got sort of in, that doesn't look quite right. That's not centered, is it? Is that better?
There you go.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. And we'll be automatically ejected, right?
Yep.
So we'll be coming back about 12:40?
Yeah.
Perfect.
12:30.
So what do you think? What do you think? It's going well, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of participation.
Yes.
And,
That's good.
I did make a decision to do some lecturing before this round because this is a very different round. But we are scheduled, actually, everyone got a notice 9 to 12:30.
Okay.
So if we run 10 minutes over, they're not going to be aggravated.
Gotcha.
Okay, let me see here. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Breakout rooms. There we are. And I am joining group E.
Okie dokie.
See ya.
Yeah.
complications. Carmen rose to fame in the late 80s, but throughout his career, he won 6 Dove Awards, selling more than 10 million records. Carmen was 65 years old. And we have some encouraging news for the Ensley community. A developer wants to repurpose the old Ensley High School building.
Yeah, it burned down in 2018, years after it closed. If the plan is approved, the former school would be home to close to 250 housing units and 15,000 square foot grocery store.
Lung cancer. Now, Limbaugh began his nationally syndicated show back in 1988, and that ever-polarizing media figure was inducted into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame just 10 years later. Rush Limbaugh was 70 years old. And the Christian music world is mourning the loss of Gospel Music Hall of Famer Carmen. He passed away yesterday from surgery complications. Carmen rose to fame in the late 80s, but throughout his career, he won 6 Dove Awards, selling more than 10 million records. Carmen was 65.
Hello.
I'm here.
I think we're about coming back.
1 minute. Wow.
You know, I've learned something from this process, and that is to make sure that we tell everyone, be on camera, that it's a requirement so that we don't see a box.
Right.
But I did see a box in a couple of cases, and just those little things you don't think about if you're not thinking about it. So anyway, everyone's coming back in about a minute, I guess. So we'll be
50 seconds.
And the first thing I'm going to do is after this meeting is look at the slides and send you my suggestions on the tweaks. But see if you can use that NSBA slide.
Okay.
If not, we'll have to recreate it.
That's fine. I have to go back in the classroom until 2:30, but.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But I would like to get NSBA the slides today if
okay.
I can. NSBA meaning Mary.
Okay.
So Mary McKee. Hello, Angela.
Hello, I'm back.
I think it went well. What do you think?
I think so too.
This round seemed very good. You know, there's only so much structure you can provide. People have to do what they
Here they come.
basically want to do. But I was very impressed by what I heard. We got a lot of follow through to do, that's for sure.
Yes.
But I think this helped get the group primed. Well, here we go. People are coming back early.
Ms. Strode, before I forget, can we check with AASB and make sure that we get credit for our whole board training? They had given us a special credence to be able to clearance to be able to do that a year ago when we started with Doug.
Oh, a year ago. Oh my gosh.
Over a year. So yeah, if we could just make sure that we can get that signed up, because they did authorize that it was approved. We had to do that before. But I think we asked for a waiver last year. But
yes, I will, Ms. Hendricks, I'll go back in reference to the email that I sent to the contact from AASB.
Okay.
And follow back up with her.
Thank you. And if we need to do anything, if we need to do anything or sign anything, just let us know.
I think we're all back. So we began our final segment, the reports and discussion from the two breakout groups. And then I will share with you very, very quickly, I promise you, the follow through steps that I'm under contract to undertake after this session. Don't forget, breakout group leaders, Angelia needs the written notes from your breakout groups, even though we are recording all of the report back dialogue, including this closing session. So with no further ado, Sandra, I'm turning it over to you for Group E.
We had an interesting conversation because in my group, we had two former superintendents. And so that was interesting to ask them what did they think about question one, which was identifying the characteristics of a healthy and effective board superintendent working relationship. And they informed us on what they were expecting when they were superintendents in their school system. And since my recorder is going to report, all of that will be in his report. And it was brought up several times about transparency from the superintendent and his relationship working with his board to keeping them informed of various things that was important to the board. But I will let my recorder give you a good full report. Doug?
Okay, Sandra. Let's see here. Just 1 second. Okay. Can everybody hear me? I guess you can. I think I'm off mute here. We started out talking about identifying the characteristics of a healthy and effective board superintendent working relationship. Number one, first of all, we felt like we need to have obviously mutual trust, high level of trust, and that comes from relationships and getting to know each other and working together and so forth. Then we felt like the board has to obviously believe the person is capable of doing the job that he or she is hired for, and have confidence in that individual and let them do that job. There has to be an open line of communication. In terms of making sure you keep the board informed on everything. And it's good to also do it from a standpoint of bi-weekly reports or weekly reports or whatever, and certainly monthly reports on what's transpiring in the district, what accomplishments, what concerns and things of that nature, so that the board can be aware, so the board will not be caught off guard when going to different places. Which goes up to the next one, which was no surprises. We want to make sure that the school board is not caught off guard or surprised in terms of things occurring and maybe getting to the media or getting to your stakeholders and then getting back to you and you have no clue of what's going on. Working in terms of professional development, we felt like it's important for all board members to go to professional development conferences, and the superintendent needs to be there with them. I've always felt like, I don't want to be missing when my board is at an event and so forth. I want to be there to hear the same thing that the board is hearing. Superintendent can't lose sight of priorities in the district, and you have to focus on the district. You can't just, for example, things may be going on and you can't just leave town, and you can't just be away as if you don't have responsibility. So you have to be focused on the priorities and make sure that you do your due diligence in that regard. All people make mistakes, and so we have to give the superintendent the latitude where you're going to make some mistakes here and so forth. We're just going to make you aware of it, try to rectify it, and use professional development, whatever the case may be, but not going to just fire you because you made one mistake here. We're just going to be patient in that regard. But if you keep on making the same old mistakes over and over again, then that's a different story. Superintendents need to treat everyone, all the board members, equally. I mean, we don't need to have bias or favoritism or situations where you're giving someone more information than the other and so forth. And I think we do a good job here in making sure that everybody gets the same information. If somebody requests something, it needs to go to everybody and not just that particular person making that request. And pretty much that was, we said that in that particular section there, and ultimately decisions must be made on the best interests of children and not for political reasons. The next category was number 2, which dealt with potential barriers and so forth. And obviously we mentioned the board not working together can cause some barriers for the superintendent that can spill over into his or her operation because of the board not getting along and so forth. The ability to hold the board, at least to hold the superintendent accountable, is another issue too, because the board hires the superintendent and you cannot interfere in situations where it comes to when you're trying to make changes, when you're going to another level, when you're transforming your district. You can't let the politics interfere with decision making. We brought up the issues about maybe in certain schools, principals may be untouchable, or certain people may have certain clout with certain people in the community and so forth on the board. You cannot let that cloud your judgment, because I'm a firm believer that if you hire someone to do the job, then you got to let that person do the job. And if you're going to tell me who to hire or who I can't fire or whatever, then you can't hold me accountable for that. So we talked about how the politics can really affect the relationship if the two entities are not on the same page, the board and the superintendent. We talked about the need to, again, in this one, to treat all members equally and to meet with each board member, the superintendent, maybe use time management in terms of texting, emailing, just meeting and listening to concerns. You may want to meet prior to a board meeting so that if you do have issues and so forth, everybody's being heard and the superintendent can listen to what's being said and then make decisions based on what information he's getting from each board member, as opposed to not listening to anyone and just allowing the board members to just come to meetings, vote on items, and no communication to indicate where we have sifted out problems prior to the meeting, and therefore we could solve those problems or resolve those issues before the meeting. One person mentioned a board manager, where in some systems, board managers, they have an office where everything concerns of the board and taking care of the board goes through that office and so forth. And some superintendents will also mention like to have board members communicate with the cabinet members, and then it comes back to him or her. And then we also mentioned that some superintendents like it to come directly to him or her, and then they just disseminate that information out to the cabinet members to get answers to our questions or concerns. We are elected officials. We brought that up, and we want to make sure that we're transparent in everything we do. And it's important for the superintendent to be transparent in getting information to us so that we can indeed know how to communicate to our stakeholders and our constituents and so forth, and make the best decisions, most importantly, on recommendations that may come forth, because we do expect responsible recommendations to come forth. Working together as a group with no personal agendas was brought up, and the superintendent has to be in line with the board vision and make sure that things are done collaboratively and not having just a unilateral vision by the superintendent. That was pretty much what was discussed in that item, and we wrapped it up by saying the strategic plan should be done in collaboration with the board, because it was stated that we got into strategic plans in the past, or where we didn't have the input on it until it got to us, and you want to make sure that you're involved in that on the very first step. And then the last one, number 3, and I'm going real fast here. We talked about communication with board members and cabinet and superintendent and so forth. We felt like the information, we discussed the information being given to the president and then communicated to the board. We also discussed the importance of the superintendent personally talking to each board member about things that need to be discussed, particularly if it affects the district and is his or her district as well, area as well. The superintendent has to have clear, established means of I guess communication in terms of, as I stated earlier, do you want your board members to come to you, or do you want them to go through the cabinet, or how do you want the protocol to be in terms of your operation? And frankly, I'm more comfortable with the superintendent being the one that gets the information from the board members as opposed to the cabinet and so forth. But that's the way I feel about that. Major changes such as initiatives, whether they be rezoning, calendar, or whatever the case may be, you don't need to have those issues out there working with the cabinet first and so forth and so on, and not letting your school board know, this is what I'm planning on doing, this is what we like to do, this is the direction you want to go. Get a pulse from your board, move forward. Not saying that we're going to micromanage you, but at the same time, you need to have the board informed, keep the board informed, because the superintendent reports to the board, and that protocol needs to be really, really managed in the respect that you are communicating first and foremost with your board. Everybody else, cabinet, mayor, stakeholders, and so forth, they're involved, but at the same time, that board needs to be the first line of contact. And we talked about basically small groups as far as keeping the board informed in terms of taking care of issues that may come up as a result of not having small groups to give us more information prior to the board meeting or prior to a recommendation being made. And we just pretty much talked about let the superintendent know expectations the board should of him or her, and let him or her do his job and work as a partner with the board, the superintendent, and the cabinet. And that pretty much summed up our session.
Well, a very productive session it was. Congratulations. Sandra and group did a great job. Any comments before we move on to?
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful job. Thank you very much. And now Sonia and Group F, take it away.
Okay. So, excuse me, my group did a great job. We had a wonderful timekeeper and Dr. Horn, and Mary was our Mary was our recorder, which she was great with that as well. Secretary, recorder. So I'm going to pass it over to Mary so that she can talk about the superintendent's goals, and then we discuss some of the potential barriers and then solutions to those goals.
Okay, thanks. I am not really quite up to this task, but I'm going to do the best I can here. So our first question, really, we asked Dr. Sullivan to identify potential chief executive leadership targets that he would like to focus on in the coming year. And the first one was around educational leadership, innovation, and student achievement issues. And on that one, he said, you know, we have the largest number of failing schools, 16 in the state, and his goal would be to eliminate that number of failing schools and take us out of the ranking at the bottom of that list. The second goal that he outlined, and I'll start with the goals first and then we'll go to barriers, was to establish a Newcomer Center for supporting our ESL students, who he described as very different than ESL students we've had in the past. The ones now are often older and have had no formal education, and they're not, and language is not the only thing that they have to deal with. So a center that would allow us to focus more aggressively on them and meet their needs in a different way. And there is a school in Texas that they'd like to perhaps model that after. His third goal would be to build on what we've been doing, but to establish a full virtual school. And so that there are certain children, 300 to 500 kids in the district, that may really benefit from going virtually full time. Fourth goal would be a modified calendar to help address summer slide and to limit the time out of school that our children have, mentioning that 80% of our kids had were below grade level before COVID. And so dealing with that is something he believes the modified calendar can do. And fifth idea would be to reinvent middle schools in the way that using our 3% sales tax to provide more equity and more offerings for our middle schools. So those were kind of the 5 key goals that he outlined. Did I miss anything, Dr. Sullivan?
Got it, Ms. Bourne.
Okay. And then the second thing he actually continued to talk about his vision on board development and support. And that would be, his goal there would be to communicate his rationale for these changes that he hopes to implement over time more aggressively with us, and to defend his proposed interventions in a more aggressive way. Does not want to get into a rut, and he wants us to all be very bold and not afraid to fail. Then we talked about, I think I might have missed something there, but then we talked really about internal district management, improvement, and support. And he wants all the departments to have standard operating procedures that right now we're too person dependent. And if that person leaves, the standard operation procedures go up in smoke. And so to set procedures in place that can be followed regardless of who's in those jobs. That's his internal district goal. And then external stakeholder relations, wants to get the partners in the community to become more closely aligned with our goals, that our goals be, the district's goals be the key piece of that. The partners come to join us, and then also to have legislative goals and to work with the city and legislators to build bills and to develop bills and laws that would represent what we would like to get accomplished in the school district. An example being the 3rd grade reading goals. He's got Smitherman working on perhaps an opportunity to postpone that goal being implemented this year. Then our next discussion was around identifying potential barriers the superintendent might face in tackling these goals, and that we had a lot to say about that. I mean, we really went goal by goal in talking about that, but we talked about that the first goal of getting our the barriers to getting out of the top, getting our failing schools off that list is going to be that we have vast differences in instruction and cultures in our schools, and how do we change that so that there is a standard culture across schools, that we have a culture of excellence in all of our schools, that we implement research-based practices in every single classroom. A barrier to ESL students, the Newcomer Center idea is to, let's see, well, to getting to those students and understanding their needs and being sure that they actually come and want to come to that. I've lost my place on where I put that down. I'm sorry, guys. The third idea was virtual schools. And of course, we've got challenges with time and turnover and okay, y'all have to help me with this one.
So we mentioned around that the school would be able to pull students from across the state. So
that's right. That's right.
PDM and other school districts, identifying personnel and staff to run it, location, those kind of things.
That's right. I found it. Yep, exactly. Okay, where it would be located. It needs to have a hub and a principal. Of course, funding is going to be a challenge, and that might be statewide. Found my notes, sorry. All right, and then the modified calendar, that we need a clearer understanding of the calendar, the what, the need, the why, that this is going to be a huge paradigm change, and change is difficult to accept. So that's going to be a barrier. Teachers are reluctant. They're not understanding the why. And that, but again, that 80% of our kids are not reading on grade level. So before COVID, so what are some other, that we really don't have other options on the table to address our significant academic challenges, but communicating that message. Barriers to board development. We have a very diverse board. And so, developing all of us is going to be a challenge. And then we, couple that with the fact that there's an election in August and we'll have new board members. So just the people and personality and of all of us just is a barrier in itself. Let's see, that the board being united and on the same page and supportive is what we hope to see accomplished there. Let me see here. All right, let's see. We're just going to go on to the next thing was to identify how the board can support the superintendent in overcoming the barriers. And that is when we have people from the community who approach us, who have their own agendas, we need to bear in mind that we should be united, that we not think about their agendas, but think about ours, and have our rationales in place. We need to be united and on the same page and supporting the superintendent's goals. Clear about how we communicate with the public, and that we ought to communicate more aggressively with the public, perhaps than we've done in the past. We should be encouraged and invited to speak to what's important for the superintendent and the district, and not be so fearful of doing that, and to be prepared to do that. And that we should use each other, that each of us have different strengths and connections, and we should use those. For example, sort of have a plan for saying, okay, this board member has these contacts, let them go speak to this person, etc. And then we should establish those targets. I said that. And really do that with intention and with one voice. And then we went, let's see, now my notes are back to barriers, but I think I won't go into that. What have I forgotten, y'all?
You got it, Ms.
That was a lot of confusing among my papers. I'm sorry.
No, it was
No,
great.
actually, it was
wonderful.
excellent.
Thank you.
Superb report. Congratulations, Sonia and group. That was another great session. Want to thank you very much. Now, my friends, let's close. We'll run just a little bit over, but within the next 3 or 4 minutes, I'll turn it over to Daji for final comments. I think 3 themes emerged today, or I should say in round 3. These are the 3 I saw. Number 1, this relationship must be managed. It can't be taken for granted. It's too fragile. So it must be consciously, systematically, formally managed, the board superintendent partnership. Number 2, another theme, you must agree on priorities at the top, leadership priorities. There are goals and goals and goals and goals in an organization this complex, this large, doing this wide a range of programs and activities. But at the top, where the board and superintendent live, at least while they're working, we need a clear agreement on leadership priorities and how we work together to achieve them. The third theme that emerges is related to management. We have to have complete, detailed agreement on guidelines for board superintendent communication and interaction. They can't be left to chance. And one of the controversial questions that came up, getting a lot of discussion nationally, is about communication with the cabinet, board communication with the cabinet. And there are diverse opinions in that area. There is, I will tell you though, a move to prevent bottlenecks from developing and to have the opportunity for board members to ask cabinet members questions and so on, but only when there are very clear guidelines for doing that and very clear limitations. Generally speaking, I would say the mantra these days, lessen the distance between the board and the superintendent. Meld a true leadership team at the top. No more we, they, no more guarding ourselves from each other, but function as a very cohesive team. Okay, how are we going to follow through? Here's what I'm obliged to do by contract. It's going to take no more than a minute to tell you what's going to happen. Number 1, I review all of the notes from our deliberations as well as my notes from my interviews, so many months ago, and sit and think about all this, and I will come up with an outline of a set of action initiatives that are explicitly aimed at taking a good board to the next level as an even higher impact governing body and cementing the board superintendent working relationship so that it lasts. I will take that outline to Mark, of course, and to the steering committee that guides my work, and Mark is a member of that steering committee. He's also a member, by the way, of the steering committee of the blog, Board Savvy Superintendent, that guides my other work. I will review that outline in detail. We'll have a lot of discussion. Based on that discussion, I will produce a complete draft of an action report that is aimed at achieving or carrying out those action initiatives. It will be a formal, highly detailed report that is very nutsy boltsy. No theory, no preaching, just plain here are some key things we need to do. Here's how we can do them. Here's how we can put them into practice. I go back to the steering committee, of course. We tweak it, and then we hold a special board work session. I'll work, of course, with Angelia on this. I'm talking about a very intensive session where the steering committee presents and explains the action recommendations. It is not a consultant show. By the time we reach this special work session, the steering committee itself is prepared to peers working with peers to go through these recommendations in detail. And it is anticipated that at this special work session, we will actually pass resolutions to implement the different action initiatives in the report. Now, one other aspect to follow through. By contract, I am expected to spend a whole day with Mark and his cabinet planning how to implement everything the board has decided by resolution we should do. And that will be a true nuts and bolts meeting. So for example, if there are some new committees we want to implement, we will go into great detail on how to get those committees implemented. So this process will end not by, sort of fizzling away to nothingness, a lot of talk, no doing. It will end with action, period. And so we got a lot of excitement in store for us. Yeah, a lot yet to come. Let's see, it's Thursday. I'm sort of losing track of days in Zoom world. I guess I can wish you a safe and satisfying weekend coming up. And let me say again how much of a privilege it is to be made part of this distinguished family and to be part of our journey to a higher impact board and to an even stronger board superintendent partnership. I appreciate being made part of this exciting development. Daji?
I just want to say thank you to everybody. We made it through the training. Thanks everybody, seriously, for your attention and for even showing up and participating. I think it's been, we've got some valuable stuff that we've talked about, and I think we've got at least a vision of what we can do to start moving forward and implementing some different measures. So thanks everybody. Good job, team.
Thank you all. And I think we are officially, Madam President, we are adjourned.